Well, the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews is under scrutiny for keeping the itinerary of his China trade visit largely secret. It's a bold move from a state leader who has had a fractured relationship with the media in the past. We are going to speak to the Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Daniel Wild, a little later on. We are also standing by for a media conference with Jacinta Allen. This week, a delegation is attending the Bao Asia Business Forum in China. It's the first Australian representation at the summit in over half a decade, a positive step in thawing icy China relations given the circumstances. Now, the government is attempting to thread a diplomatic needle here, maintain a strong foothold in our region, appease China's strong rhetoric after the AUKUS submarine deal and re-establish trade connections. And this is happening all at the same time. Let's take you live to China now. The Assistant Trade and Manufacturing Minister, Tim Ayres, joins us. Good to have a connection from China. So what are you picking up from the Bao conference?
Well, it's an enormous conference, really, but it has business leaders from across the region, including from our hosts here, the Chinese government representatives from across the region, and of course representatives of the Chinese government. It's, as you say, I'm the first Australian government representative to travel here since 2016, and it's an important opportunity to prosecute the argument for Australia's interest.
How was the reception?
Well, it's been a very warm reception here. I've had a series of constructive and positive meetings with members of the business community, including the Australian business community, some of whom are here, and also with my Chinese counterpart, Vice Minister Wang Xiaowen, who I met with yesterday. So it's been already been a series of useful engagements on behalf of the Australian government, and I'm looking forward to 2 more days here, Laura, before I hop on a plane and come back home.
Yeah, there's a lot of businesses and our whole economy, a lot of people relying on trade and therefore on you, Minister, to get these sanctions, all of the sanctions dropped and get our trade back on track. Once you come home from China, what does success look like? Are you aiming to make serious inroads there, or are you managing expectations a little better?
Well, as Don Farrell said the other day, these trade impediments weren't imposed overnight, and they won't be resolved overnight. But we are on a purposeful, calm and consistent trajectory here, where there's been engagement at ministerial level, including my meeting with my counterpart earlier this year, Don Farrell, with the Chinese Commerce Minister shortly following that, and we expect invitations being issued. We expect a meeting over the coming weeks and months between Don Farrell in China. Now, at every opportunity, including at official level, where there's been very detailed discussions about these trade impediments, we are making the case for the Australian national interest. There has been some progress. Your viewers will have seen that coal imports to China have not just been contracted for, but coal has arrived in China's ports.
So coal is a good thing sometimes, then?
Well, we aim to be a reliable partner for the export of our commodities and products, and coal and gas are important, and it's an important objective for the government to secure the return of coal into the Chinese market. Now that has occurred. There is still some progress to go. Over issues like seafood, wine and barley, that are the subject of WTO disputes, and this is going to require careful and thorough and consistent application over a period of time. These trade impediments should never have been imposed in the first place. They're bad for Australian exporters, argue bad for Chinese consumers, but they're bad for the confidence of participants in the region in the rules-based order and in normal trade. We've been making that case consistently, and we'll keep making it. and I've been encouraged by the access and the constructive discussions that have occurred thus far.
Okay, well, you're in China. We appreciate you talking to us from China, because transparency is really important when we're dealing with one of our biggest trading partners. But the Victorian Premier, Daniel Andrews, has not been so forthcoming. He's, as a Premier, going in China at the moment on a trip there to talk about trade and education. He refused to take media with him. He's only done one interview with state-owned television that was out of Hong Kong. Do you think that's acceptable when we talk about how important democracy is?
Well, I've read the reports from the Australian press, and I mean, Premier Andrews has his office has briefed the department. He's engaged with the government prior to his departure. I mean, it is a challenge.
Engage with the government, sure, but I mean, what about the rest of us? Yeah, what about the rest of us, i.e., the public?
Well, it is a problem, to be fair, that there are no Australian journalists in China.
But isn't that the point? That if you believe in democracy and you're the Victorian Premier, you're going to China, and yes, I understand how difficult it is for journalists to get there, but he could have used this opportunity at the very least to make a point saying, I'm coming to China, we need to get relationships back on track, our trade is important, but we are a democracy in Australia. A central tenet of that is a free press. Therefore, I'm bringing them with me. That is not unreasonable.
As I understand it, his objectives are around issues like the education sector in Victoria and the access of Chinese students to the education sector and a range of similar issues. I can't speak to his media schedule or his itinerary, but I'm sure that he'll be available on his return for interviews. It is a problem, Laura, that there's no.
He hasn't put himself up for an interview for a while.
In China,
and that conference you're at, I've been there. I've been there with previous leaders. I've been there with, I think, 2 previous leaders. So it's not, beyond our capacity.
Well, I think it is certainly the case that in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, that Australian journalists have not been able to be in China.
Yeah.
We have different systems, of course.
Yep.
In Australia, we value freedom of the press and freedom of movement, and these concepts, they're important to our understanding of democracy.
Yep.
It would be a good thing if there were Australian journalists in the corridors of the conference that I'm at, and in China more broadly. It would serve to mean that there was better information, better analysis, and so it's in the interests of both countries, in my view, as well as being in the interest of the press gallery. I know that there is a lot of interest in this subject.
Yep.
And I've tried to do as much media engagement, not just with the international press and the Chinese press who are here, but also with Australian media while I've been on this trip. It's not perfect, and I expect that Mr. Andrews is encountering the same challenges, and we've got to focus on what our objective is here, and we'll raise these issues in a consistent and calm way as we work to stabilise the relationship.
All right, Tim Ayres, we really appreciate you talking to us from Bal. We appreciate the line staying steady for us and no mysterious cutouts.
It's been pretty good so far.
It's been good. It's been good.
That's very good. All right, I'll see you in a week or so.
See you soon.